I'm Dr. John Wayne Wilson. Clients know me as Dr. John. I'm in private practice. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I've been in private practice for about 8 years. Work with individuals and work with couples, and I work with family members. Shortly after the beginning of 2020, as information started coming out from the CDC and from local and state and national government agencies, I kept my office open for a month or two. Have no idea as to when I'm going back in my office due to how the virus has continued to spread. And so if I'm around people, I want to know what their vaccination status is. So if people are vaccinated, I'm more okay with being around them. But otherwise, if they're not, then I have a mask on, or I pretty much stay home. Which means I've isolated myself from things I like to do, people I like to hang out with, and also my clients were becoming concerned about being out in public, and they also were being shut down at work and having to work from home. So people just saw it as a way to not having to go to work, being out of traffic. So it wasn't particularly stressful at that point. Most people that I work with kind of experienced it as an extended vacation. Government agencies, some of them, state politicians, local government kept putting out these arbitrary dates when we're going to get back to work, back in the office. I think that is when I noticed a shift in my clients' levels of stress. Uncertainty was very high. And when uncertainty is very high, people experience a lot of stress, mood shifts, anxiety levels go up. We like predictability, and so that's just a human thing. And so when that is questioned or in doubt, mental health issues start coming up. And so what I started doing with clients was like warning them, like, look, I know you feel pretty much the same as you did back in February, but I want you to assume that you're dealing with a higher level of stress, which means you're dealing with a higher level of anxiety. And so that means you need to be more mindful of self-care. Unfortunately, some of the things that people do for self-care are outside of the home and in public, and those places were shutting down. So movie theaters, bowling lanes, clubs. There was also pressures for restaurants to kind of shut down or contain their services. So the things people would ordinarily do, they couldn't do. And so they were forced to be creative, inside the house. And that sometimes was difficult. The more introverted you were, it seemed like the easier the transition was. Because I think people recognized that what COVID was making them do, they ordinarily would do anyway. It was the people who were more extroverted that struggled outwardly with that. But as the year went on, that was also, during that time, there was also when there was increasing amount of political unrest with the upcoming presidential election. There was racial unrest, and there was a heightened focus on police interactions with people, police brutality, and with the protesting. That, on top of the COVID, provided a cocktail of stress inducement that many people had not experienced in their life, especially young people. Some people were becoming demoralized. Some were becoming more activated. Many people were very pessimistic, especially young folk. A particular client of mine was very pessimistic about how things would be in the United States. He had not lived through this kind of unrest. He had not experienced this kind of concern around health. And so he was thinking that, that society would just unravel. And so, so part of my work was to kind of help him have a more balanced perspective on all that. So I had to use my experience as a kid to kind of help balance out some of my clients' perspectives on what was going on now, that this too shall pass. This will not escalate to whatever narrative you're creating in your head. It was interesting. Some couples found being at home working and being isolated actually was a benefit to their relationship. COVID eliminated a lot of distractions that we have in our life. COVID didn't allow you that latitude to be distracted from these things, because you're with your partner almost 24/7, and so because primarily everybody was having to work from home, and so it was a tough time. And a few kids that I was working with at the time were having difficulty not being able to kind of live their lives as teenagers or as in middle school. They were missing their friends. They couldn't play outside. Their parents were really containing their movement. So some of them thought their parents were being just too strict. So they started experiencing depressed moods, a lot more anxiety. And so, it started impacting kids' mental health in a very significant way. And so some of my clients were considering, like, I may need to quit my job because I do not want to put my kids' health or lives in danger, or my partner's lives in danger. And so, and even some of the people who are working in hospitals, just the things they had to do when they came home, they couldn't go home and just hug their kids or hug their partner. They had to do this whole cleaning routine. But that was hard for healthcare workers and also for the families of healthcare workers. People were looking for information. A lot of people weren't looking in the right places. So they go to some search engine like Google, or they go to YouTube and find somebody. Then you had these kind of what's called cognitive distortions come into play, where people were looking for information that confirmed some idea they had in their head that would then lead them to behave in a particular kind of way. Didn't mean it was correct information, didn't mean that the behavior was healthy, but that confirmation bias allowed people to kind of like deal with their anxiety or their concern. They were setting up themselves to sabotage their mental health because they weren't really doing self-care things, and they weren't dealing with reality that was really there. It was whatever they found that kind of fit their internal dialogue, unfortunately, they would go with. Confirmation bias, feeling somehow that, I'm immune. The things that we typically say that young people attribute to, like when they're doing risky things. I find it doesn't matter what age. People, I work out, I eat healthy, my body, so I don't need to be concerned about COVID. Or when the narrative of COVID was just like the flu, using that as a reason for not either being concerned about the virus. Then of course you got the QAnon and all that other stuff about it's a conspiracy, and so all this is floating around and it's causing a lot of mental distress for a lot of people. And some family members, they split with one another over COVID, thinking it was a political thing. I'm in control of my body, and I'm not. You can't mandate me, make me do something. Most of our lives are mandated by certain things. We get in the car, we put a seatbelt on. Now it's the norm. We don't even think about it. But I did see an old 1982, I believe, news story about when seatbelts were being mandated, and the very same arguments that are being expressed now were being expressed then.
It is a new seatbelt ordinance. If the town council gets its way, seatbelts will be mandatory for everybody riding in the front seat of a car through Richland.
I'll have to detour the town to get to Kalamazoo. If they pass a seatbelt ordinance where I don't use a seatbelt.
I wouldn't wear my seatbelt. If I get caught, I get caught.
I hear it's uncomfortable. It wrinkles my clothes. It's not cool.
There's no freedom no more. You don't want to wear it? That's your choice.
So we could have transplanted that and just taken out seatbelts and put masks, and it would be entirely the same.
That's still in play right now. Most real dangers we have, it's kind of concrete. You can see or something, but the virus, you can't see. You have no idea whether you're carrying it or not. So once again, they use whatever narrative in their head to say that, I'm not in danger. That's up north, or that's that out west. That's not here in my part of the country. So a lot of people got left out in the cold because you're not getting support if you're around people who don't believe it's real. Many of the healthcare workers that worked with, because I know I worked with some doctors who worked in emergency, the amount of deaths increased, especially among seemingly healthy and younger people. And death came quick. Or if you have a couple, because there were some couples who died a week apart and they were like in their 30s or early 40s, that's hard to swallow. And so your mortality is put in your face, like this can happen to anybody. So that uncertainty was a real thing, and we don't like uncertainty. We like I said, we like things to be certain because we can predict it. At least we feel like we can. Now I call that the delusion of control, where we expect and want to feel like we're in control, even if it's delusional, even if it's not based on truth or accuracy. It's hard to make healthy and good decisions when you are not dealing with what's going on in a real way. But as long as that narrative is in your head, like I've told many of my clients, when you create a narrative, it is always perfect in your head. At some point, reality will force its way into your world. Take care of yourself, and so like you can't go get a spa, you can't do yoga, can't do some of the other things. But self-care also includes being honest with yourself, being straight with yourself, and checking yourself. Because we as humans, we have a tendency of putting on rose-colored glasses. So any change, whether it's a change you want or don't want, whether it's a change that feels good or feels bad, change in of itself produces stress. People are going to be battling with or dealing with wanting things to be back how it used to be. The reality is nothing ever goes back to how it used to be in some earlier point in time. So the ability to which you can accept that things are different now will assist you in reducing the amount of stress you experience and helping you with the transition to creating whatever norm is going to be the norm at that time. People are going to have to still continue to adapt and then accept the adaptation they have to make. What I always suggest to people and encourage people to do is accept that this is the reality, accept that things are going to be different, but this gives you an opportunity to create a new norm in the future. Coronavirus is not going away. It can be, I imagine it will be managed better, and it will be, the amount of incidence of this being around will decrease, but you have the opportunity to create a new norm. It's not going back to how it used to be. This is the new reality. But this new reality will be gone at some point. There'll be another one. So grab a hold of that and make that, what you want. Well, one of the things I talk about with my clients is being selfish. Now, when I say selfish, I'm not talking about how people normally or typically talk about selfish behavior. I'm talking about behaviors that are focused on yourself and your physical, spiritual, and emotional well-being. People are emotionally exhausted, spiritually exhausted, and of course physically exhausted. And so you have to attend to those things. You have to go outside your box. So if you've never done meditation, you may need to try it. If you've never done yoga, you may need to try it. If you're not working out, you may need to start doing that. You have to be creative. So, for example, one of my clients last year, he decided to take his family, wife and 2 kids, during the pandemic, before the vaccine, on a cross-country trip in an RV. They rented an RV and they just drove a country, which was one of the best things he said he's ever done for himself and his family. But the family was able to connect in a way they hadn't been able to do ever, really, while also disconnecting from the stressors of work. That would not have happened unless COVID had come around. If COVID was not around, him and his wife would have been working the way they always worked. The kids would have been in school like they always would have been. They would have taken their traditional trips or whatever, see family, holidays. They wouldn't have considered renting an RV and traveling across the country for 3 to 4 weeks. If they were willing to do that, they handled COVID and the restrictions and the isolation much better. For some individuals, that was difficult to do. You had to decide for yourself, even if it went against, how your family thought about things or did things, or how friends thought about or did things. You had to really do what you felt was going to be best for you and to try certain things. I'd had several clients who were considering quitting their jobs, but they loved their jobs. They just hated if the upper management didn't take it serious, or they didn't feel like they were being supported. If they felt like their bosses just wanted them to come back into the office or come back in just so I can see you work. And so that's what they really were not liking. And so that became a daily stressor. And so part of my role was to kind of help people kind of pull that apart and help them really understand like what was making them feel the ways they were feeling, and put things in its proper place so they can make the best decision for themselves and their family if they had to, and understand consequences to all choices and opportunities to all choices, which can be hard in this atmosphere.
Obviously, I'm the person who made the decision on the curfew. My plan is to continue the curfew.
For real? Ready? Are you serious? You guys didn't even look on the app. Don't look on the app for me. I didn't even count to look on the app for me. Are you serious? You gonna let them do this?
The cops just arrested a food delivery bicycle.
But essential workers are essential workers. Any essential worker doing their job is exempted from the curfew. And we are making that abundantly clear to everyone, to the essential workers themselves, and to the NYPD.
China Williams, a janitor, was leaving work when he encountered a protest. It was nearing curfew time. He was in the crowd when police trapped them and arrested some protesters and him for violation of the curfew, even though he presented a piece of paper indicating his post-curfew privileges as an essential worker. On March 1st, 2020, New York City confirmed its first case of COVID-19. By the end of March, New York City had become the worst affected area in the United States, forcing schools to close, non-essential businesses to shut down, and public transportation service reduced. Many people were forced to work from home remotely. But some of the essential workers had no choice but to go to their jobs, risking their own safety. They carry on like good soldiers would, diligently working until the mission is accomplished. For as long as the pandemic rages on, they will continue to serve us. COVID-19 and the restrictions were causing an alarming rise in mental health issues among the young and old, straining many family relationships. Being locked up in quarantine in close quarters with someone you don't like as much as when you first got married has been a pressure cooker. Divorce rates have increased along with a rise in domestic violence, making this war against COVID-19 a battle on many fronts.
You had to deal with certain things, and people found out they actually got along better than they thought, that the person they chose to be was the right person. Now, the other side of the coin is some people found out when the distractions were gone, they didn't particularly like the person they was with at home. And so many relationships were tested, many probably ended. COVID didn't allow you that latitude to be distracted from these things, because you're with your partner almost 24/7, and so because primarily everybody was having to work from home. Some of my clients were healthcare professionals; they were essential workers, and initially it was selective in who people thought were essential. So if you had if you were a doctor and things like that, you were essential. But maintenance and let's say office cleaners, personnel who provided food for hospitals and clinics, they weren't necessarily thought of as essential workers. But if they're not working, the place isn't open. And if the place is not open, then the healthcare professionals can't do their job. And so at the beginning, a lot of them felt that their needs or concerns were not being appreciated. And so, but they also had to kind of deal with figuring out what they were going to do with regards to their job, because most helpers will look to help other people before they help themselves.
I live in the South Bronx. I'm medical assistant at Bellevue Hospital, New York City. I started working from the beginning of the pandemic, COVID-19, until now. Bellevue is a big hospital, it's busy all the time, But now with the pandemic, a lot of patients from different hospitals, especially city small hospital, being transferred to Bellevue Hospital. So we overwhelm every day. Doctor, nurses, medical assistant, technician. We really need to be at the hospital. Have a husband waiting for me. Sometimes the hospital keeping me from 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock p.m. But because we working as a team, he really understands that everything I do in my life reflects in his life. It's very stressful, sometimes cause anxious, sometimes cause kind of panic, but as a human being, sometimes the reaction or the issues the patient carry to the institution affect your day at work. So we have to prepare ourselves in the beginning of the day. In this way, my practice of Buddhism, I'm practicing Nichiren Buddhism, so in my routine, spirit routine in the morning, I always chanting to do my best every day. That helping me a lot to handle 100% compassionate care, and of course to employ my knowledge with a lot of love. The big thing for me in the pandemic is that we lost a very young nurse, 31 years old nurse, that I saw by experience, like they put every effort, they use everything to really save her life. But we lost her in less than 3 months. To see the patient die so easily, sometimes I saw that they employ the same care to one patient to another, and sometimes I analyze why this patient not survive it. Of course, we suffer a lot, but of course, I think this is a lesson for us, for everybody. My life condition, my knowledge, my compassion, my love for my patient bring happiness to them, not only to the patient, to family members, to the community, to the city. If you don't live your moment in life, you don't know when it's time to go. And sometimes I notice like some co-workers not there, some doctor not there. In my mind, I just wonder where they are. But I feel like maybe tomorrow, maybe later, I have to miss a day at work. We put our heart. We forget the time. We forget if the patient is smelling, or the patient verbally abuse you, or the patient insult because I have very heavy accent, or maybe I don't say properly in the proper grammar their language, But in that moment, especially in COVID-19, we have to bring compassion, very good gratitude from the patient, very good gratitude. That say, thank you so much for being my angel today. Thank you so much for being nice with me. Thank you for bringing hope on me that this COVID is not the end, it's going away. So that's why, that's the experience I have in this pandemic.
Working with some people, I know they were, with their jobs and their jobs being difficult and being healthcare providers, I tried to help them separate out their frustrations and anger with regards to their work. Help them understand that they didn't necessarily dislike or hate their jobs. They really didn't like the policies that were coming out from their institutions or bosses, which placed them or didn't consider their concerns. They still enjoy working with their patients or their clients. They still enjoy working with their coworkers. It was the bureaucracy and the policies around their jobs that they disliked.
So tell me what your work experience has been like during the pandemic.
It's a little bit different, but now since things are coming back to life with the vaccinations, the capacity is coming back. So it's like I feel undervalued now that I am considered an essential worker, because before it was just like a regular position, and now it's like my position is more valued because of the pandemic.
Did you have any work at home options during the pandemic?
No, I did not.
As an essential worker, were things emotionally difficult?
Yes, it was a bit stressful, not seeing people, not being able to go out, live your normal life, so it was a bit stressful.
So tell me, how did the stress affect you?
I smoked more. They stated that marijuana smoking is legal, so it made it even more convenient for me to smoke more. I realized the habit went skyrocket.
The acknowledgement, I don't know if it's increased, but at least the acknowledgement of many more people using different substances to help them. And so be it alcohol through wine or beer, or even hard liquor, but also the increased uses of marijuana and other illegal drugs. And so that can come back to kind of bite you in the butt.
Mental health experts say the pandemic has left many feeling overwhelmed and overpowered. A recent study done by researchers at UC Merced determined 80% of young adults at the campus had high levels of anxiety and depression. More people are now turning to drugs and alcohol as a coping mechanism.
Life has been really strange. It's been more me and my girlfriend, me and my relative at home. We just stick to a small circle. It's usually more people than that since the pandemic. You know, things are different. The pandemic actually kind of brought things back together, some people closer. If you had a little distance between your families, and it brought us closer. So it was like a bittersweet thing with the pandemic. Like I was a little grateful for it, like to have more time to value life with the people that do matter and that's gonna be there. We share the mutual feelings as far as being sad and depressed and stressed and caged in because of the pandemic. I'm adjusting to it. I do hospital care investigation. I'll interview a patient, some of the ages from 25 to about 50, and then the next following weekend they're gone. So sometimes it took a toll on me because I was really trying to make sure that they had the proper assistance. And it was a little sad and depressing. I look forward to helping my patients, so I just, at the end of the day, that's something I take upon myself. Something that I found really strange about my job was when the pandemic started, we had staff members that started to give us package with food, clothes, extra materials that we needed, and then it stopped. They contradicted so many statements saying that we're going to get extra pay. I never received any pay. I took both shots of the vaccine. I didn't receive any hundreds. I feel like the pandemic is really starting to take a toll on a lot of people because it's like, when is it going to be over? We want it to be over. We need it to end.
Anything more to say? This is the moment to say it. Anything at all.
I hate my job. You know that? I hate my job, but I can't blast them how I want to blast them. I hate them.
Why do you hate them?
Because they don't appreciate me.
A social worker supervisor, but prior to that, I was a case manager for 23 years. I work in Mashula Gardens. It's a supportive housing for tenants who are chronically homeless with persistent and severe mental illness.
Did you work from your location during the pandemic?
In the beginning, and then we were home for 5 months, and they demanded us to come back. But it was more work because I had to get creative. Because when you were there in the building, the tenants come downstairs all day. So you're busy, you're trying to do notes, you're just doing things. But at home, I had to really use a voice and get creative. pull up documents that I didn't pay attention to before to assess their mental health. I just had to be really creative because I had to make up that time. So it was real difficult coming back. I didn't want to come back. But then on the other hand, people were suffering because the tenants were doing what they wanted to do. We had no staff. And remember, they chronically homeless with severe and persistent mental illness. So a part of me, if I don't want to keep being selfish, I can say that I was kind of glad to be back because you get to see them.
Was it stressful working from home?
Honestly, I really know, because I love to be home. It was more work, but I really loved it. And only thing affected me was the fact that other people died. And being at home, it did keep me disconnected from the clients. And I didn't know what was going on in the home. And we lost several clients every month from December 31st, January 10th, February 10th, March, all the way until June. They were dead in the apartment, a lot of them. Even though the clients live in the building we work in, and we're supposed to do a home visit, have 2 face-to-face home visits a month, we were disconnected because we couldn't go in the homes. So a lot of the clients who are mentally ill, you learn them. I had a tenant who's immaculate. So when she's not taking her medication, she decompensated. So her apartment will be filthy, so I know that she got sick. So with the pandemic, they were able to hide what they were doing because we only could go to the door.
Did any of your coworkers get sick from COVID?
Oh my goodness. I wasn't going to get vaccinated because I was like, no medication and stuff like this. We had a 20-year-old, the super, he got sick. He was only 25. Went up in his apartment, quarantine, was fine. Then we had the young lady, she's 25. She caught COVID, went home, quarantine, she was fine. One lady, Miss Bencion, security, she was 60, a little older than me, 60-something. I always tell her, put your mask on, because the tenants come to the window to ask for us. Oh no, Miss Johnson, I can't breathe. She really had no health issues, but like a hearing aid, maybe just a little fractured hip. She caught COVID, kidneys fell, wound up incubated, so that's what provoked me to get the shot because I know that I smoke. So if she got into that condition and she never smoked cigarettes, and I could imagine what would happen to me. And I told her every day, please put your mask on, because the clients, no matter how much we had everything for them, masks, gloves, everything, they'll still come right in your face with no mask. They didn't have that tenacity to really take this serious and thinking that they're not going to get it. And then it really broke my heart to see, and she never came back. I had no family. So staff had to be the family and pretended like one of my coworkers had to pretend he was her brother to the ICU ward because nobody knew she was there. But I was really against taking the shot. And the job was pestering me every day. And I was like, you're not going to demand me to take anything. This is my body. But come to find out, they knew in the long run that if you don't take it, you won't have no job.
I'm in control of my body, and I'm not, you can't mandate me, make me do something, which I find kind of intellectually or emotionally silly and immature, because most of our lives are mandated by certain things. We get in the car, we put a seatbelt on. Now it's the norm. We don't even think about it.
And the tenants too, to see so many of them die, like broke my heart. I seen the bodies there because they used more drugs, because they were isolated. So, and a lot of people criticize substance abuse, but sometimes substance abuse, people have a relationship with it. When they don't have friends and family, they use the drug as a person. And the corona, it impacted them so much they used more drugs. So a lot of the dead bodies were of overdoses.
I work throughout the borough of the Bronx. I am a director of operations for the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. And that's where I oversee group homes and day programs for individuals with developmental disabilities. So I knew once the pandemic hit, I would be an essential employee. When the pandemic first started, it was scary. Everyone was just scared because no one knew how you could really get it. It was, first they said don't wear masks, then they said wear masks. So everyone was just scared, just their overwhelming fear. They didn't want to be near people, they didn't want to do things, and then it was like, how do you protect yourself? PPE, personal protective equipment, was almost impossible to obtain. I gave staff permission to just use what they had. Whatever you had that could work, use it. I wasn't fearful for myself, but I was fearful for the individuals we served, and plus my family. When COVID first started, my family would meet me at the door to spray me down because I would go into different group homes and I was exposed to so many people that it was the best thing to do before I even went in, to just spray me down totally. And then once I was in there, straight to the shower, and all my clothes went into a clear plastic bag until I was able to wash them. It was hard. It was daily meetings with the team, and it was daily moments of silence for whoever we lost. One of my good friends, she actually was diagnosed with COVID, and I couldn't reach her for like 4 days. And when I finally got a message, she was in what they call that? Intensive care, ICU, and totally machine, tubes all over. Couldn't say a word to me, but was on FaceTime. I could just see. So I just asked questions and she just would nod. And we did that until she was able to get out of ICU and get all those tubes off of her. So once I found out she was there, we just did that every day. And just watching that was heartbreaking. And the person couldn't breathe on their own, and it was a struggle. And also listening to all the machinery around for other people who couldn't breathe. That person went from Mount Sinai to Jacob Javits and was in Jacob Javits during the time. That was the, I like to say makeshift hospital, but that was an emergency hospital that was set up for people because all the hospitals were overwhelmed at the time. To this day, it's been, what is it? It's well over a year, it's almost 2 years now since COVID came into our lives. And she still can't breathe good. Only other thing that stood out was the roads were clear. All the roads were clear and silent when COVID first happened. And going in, there's a funeral home that's like a few blocks away, about 5 blocks away from where I work. I've never seen so many people waiting in line to get into a funeral home. Never in my life. People were all over, out into the street, waiting to get into a funeral home. It was just, I would talk to my mother about it. When I see it, I was like, I've never seen so many people outside of a funeral home waiting. Couldn't find funeral homes to service people quickly. We had to just try to get people claimed so they wouldn't go into Potter's Field right away. The hospitals, I used to go by the refrigeration trucks. I just couldn't, it was just unbelievable. And when I would hear the news, people thinking it was fake, I said, they need to come see it. I'm out there in those streets seeing the refrigerator trucks expanding and getting more and more coming out because the hospitals couldn't handle the death. All the people who died. To the funeral homes, they couldn't handle it. And then they get in a couple of refrigeration trucks by them and holding all the bodies. It was just so many bodies. People didn't know what to do with them. So much death in such a short period of time. It was just so overwhelming. It was overwhelming.
So thank you for attending. So right now, if you have any comments or questions, you can just unmute yourself or use the reaction button to raise your hand. And who we have on panel today is Dr. John Wilson and also Emmett H. Thrower, the director and producer. So we're open for any comments or questions.
Well, I'm not gonna be shy. Let's get to this now. First of all, congratulations, Yogi, man. That thing was deep. That was deep.
Thank you.
It took me through. First of all, I remember where I was when it started in March, and then by August, I had to relocate to Montana doing what God said do. But I remember a lot of the trauma I had experienced. But until I saw your movie, I didn't realize, because I had some tears of like saying, "Whoa, I went through that. Whoa, I went through that." There's a healing process going through for me even right now. I want to thank Dr. John for his expertise on it, on how he gave out a lot of important information. But what kept me going was my personal relationship with the Lord and the Holy Spirit that kept me through all that, to keep my sanity. You know, being a youthful 67, I had to keep maneuvering. You know, you need to do 2 more documentaries, one on the youth, what they went through, because I have a 29-year-old and I had to constantly encourage him. And I said, yo, man, I understand, because you should be out there sowing your oats, doing your thing. But you got to use what they kept telling everybody in the beginning, wisdom. Wisdom was me, I'm high risk and I know it. Whenever I went out, mask on, gloves, sanitizer. I didn't play that. I wasn't trying to intellectualize or anything else. I followed the instruction. Second of all, I'm reminded of a saying, adapt and change and adapt. And that self-care is very important. And that I remember as being a senior, how I had to maneuver. 7 o'clock as a senior, I was out in the stores and back home. You had to use a lot of wisdom navigating all this. Also on I don't know if I'm an introvert or outer bird, I just knew I could maneuver anyway, you know, because I had hobby, I had skills. I had between media, I have, you know, doing ministry, encouraging others and letting them know that this too shall pass. That's true. But in the meantime, use this time to work on you, fall in love with you, you know, encourage one another, you know, because I use this time as well as my mother had just got through having her spinal surgery, 2 years of taking care of her, and I was exhausted. And I'm like, oh God, and then everything shut down until June when the Lord told me to go. But I use that time to rest. I use all this time to connect with family, encourage and love and make memories. Yes, I remember going into Grand Central when your niece was talking about going into the city, the streets were so empty. I remember coming down because I had to meet somebody at Grand Central. I looked and I said, man, this thing is straight out sci-fi. You know, like the world had just about ended and everything. There was nobody. Even trying to go down into the terminal, hardly anybody. Everything was either roped up or something. It was learning how to maneuver through this. Also, Me, I'm not vaccinated because the Holy Spirit already told me that I would have an allergic reaction, I would die. So that's why I use constant wisdom. But I remember my family members, all of them calling me stupid and this and that. I said, whatever. What I have to do what the Lord is telling me to do, because I know. He said, you have allergic reaction, and I know his voice. What I look like, I'm getting ready to die. And remember what God said. He gonna say, did I tell you not to? So for everybody, it's different what they have to do. What you must do to take care of you is your responsibility. It means getting more information, wearing the mask. I live in Montana. I'm gonna make you all laugh. Here in Montana, there's a law. They don't mandate you to take any shots. So we have half the people with shots, and the other half not. Half of them wearing masks and the other half not. Me, every time I go, I got my mask on. I'm not even playing that. I'm not playing Russian roulette because wisdom is wisdom. It is a virus. The difference between the COVID-19 that I'm seeing and the influenza that happened years ago is that we just, in a technological era where there's more information coming out and people are seeing more and more fear is coming out. So, and that delusion control, I like that, Dr. John. That was real good. Delusion of control. Good stuff, man. I had to holler. And that's about it. That's all I had to say. But I want to thank you so much. Great job. And you need to do one on the youth and one on the seniors, how they had their image.
Well, you're a brilliant documentary filmmaker. The way that you structured this story with the interviews and the way that you allowed for the interviewee to tell that story, it was just remarkable. And I'm wondering about the process that you did with the people that you interviewed. Did you have a pre-interview meeting with them in advance, or did you just go straight into it? Because it was just so natural.
Okay, well, my process is probably way different than most documentary filmmakers, because I believe that films like documentaries, which I love, develop themselves. Let people tell their stories.
I feel that, yeah.
My creativity is taking what they give me and creating off that. So I have no preset, definite way of how anything should go. I may give them, these are some questions I may ask you, but I don't do a pre-interview or try to do overly
Right.
prepare.
And you know what? That's why it doesn't read as like straight up journalism. Like you made this into a work that really relates to people's human experience. And you know, I was touched by it. I needed this. This was medicine for me because I was remembering those empty streets, and I was remembering each of those moments that these people were so generous to share their personal experience and their struggle. And I felt it, and it was such a great way of constructing the film. So formally and just emotionally on every level, this is a brilliant document, and it will go down in history as the synopsis of these pandemic times. I guarantee, because it is just such a brilliant work, and everybody should see this. You should show this in all of the public schools. You should make sure that everybody sees this film. And I will do my best to work that back channel, because I really enjoyed this film because I needed it as medicine. It was good medicine, and I really appreciate it, Emmett. And Emmett, I just wanted to put one final word and let other people ask questions. But I wanted to say the one thing that was missing from the film that was part of my experience with my own son was the aspect of virtual schooling and the shift to virtual schooling and how that impacted children's communication with their education. And in a lot of ways, it erased some access issues. In a lot of ways, it created additional barriers and access issues, and it revealed a lot of things about access issues. It's fascinating to me. That aspect could really be a good augmentation to what you've created. I mean, it's a flawless film, but that aspect of it is something that really would be if you ever want to extend it, there's a bit of a story to be told about virtual schooling that's just, it's just insane.
I'd like to pick up. Hey, it's Blick. Can you hear me?
Hi, Blake.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the online schooling, because I was teaching at York College in Jamaica, and then we got kicked into this online schooling, and it was so horrific. I mean, granted, it was also the first semester that they, it was the middle semester that they kicked over. But qualitatively, and I saw, I ended up just retiring. I was so frustrated. I was so frustrated by the qualitative aspects of the online training. And I want to say something about this film. You know, I see Dr. John. Of course, the first thing that pops in my mind is the great musician who died a couple of years ago. You know, so what the title, what the film? I know it was a pandemic film, but it just was. You know, it was in my mind. I was thinking of musical rhythms and visually, and I know this because I know your work. You know, I know your work well. Visually, it flowed. I'm not just talking about. I saw you got pop drifted incidental music there, you know, but visually, the way that you constructed it with the interviews and interspersing with the scenes of the pandemic, there was such a nice oral and visual cadence to it. And and that was good because when you got the personal testimony, you went so far in with the people, and then it was good that you could take a breath out. And then your breath out though was usually isolation, right? It was like inhalation. People were inhaling. You were inhaling these people's pain and their stories, and then it would cut out outside of yourself, and outside of yourself was the polar opposite. So I like that. I thought you achieved a really nice, a really nice cadence with it, and it was more than successful. What you wanted to achieve was it was like music. You hit the notes, man. You hit the notes on this, and so thank you.
You really caused me. Forgive me, I'm being lazy. I'm in bed. You really caused me to relive this whole thing again, which just tore my heart out. But like the apostle, I was encouraging people to please use this time to upgrade your mental, physical, and spiritual self. It was such a perfect time to just focus on that, because there was really nothing else we could do but try to be the best that we possibly could be at that time. So thank you so much. You know, it really was a wonderful film. The music was fabulous. Can you get the music from somewhere on a CD?
I never thought about that, but I'll think about that.
Yes, thank you so much. And you as well, Mrs. Barbara.
Oh, thank you.
So wonderful. Yes, all of you are wonderful. Dr. John, everybody. It was just really good. Really, really. Thank you.
I mean, there's the science around the vaccine and around the virus, and the longer it goes on, we know more about it. But the consistent thing that I've come across that sometimes I find people not willing to either accept or recognize is the emotional component that I think you tapped into in the film. You know, and so because over this time, because I've worked with healthcare workers, I've worked with school administrators, teachers. We're talking about the impact on kids. I have seen so many people suffer, so many people having to deal with loss in terms of death, and me having reactions of people kind of minimizing that. Because I know when it first came off, one of my clients was telling me about a relative who was from New York City, who she lives down here, but she was minimizing the impact of the virus because she said, well, that's up north and we're down here in Georgia. So that's, I'm like, the virus has no boundaries. And so I just found a lot of people just not being ready to deal with the realities of what the situation was. So like with the young client that I had mentioned in the documentary, I had to go back to I'm 61. So I had to go back to like the late 60s and 70s when it was like the riding over the Vietnam War and other things. They're like, look, that happened. I remember all that stuff in the streets of Brooklyn or whatever, but that passed. This too will pass. And so I think a lot, it's a new reality. And so to me, you got to accept that this is new reality. Because if you accept that this is new reality, you can come up with new opportunities to live a full life. Not everything that has happened for people during this time has been devastating, because I've had some clients, actually, their lives have gotten better. Their relationships have gotten better. They've gotten job promotions or new jobs. they became parents or grandparents, but they felt guilty kind of talking about it. I do virtual therapy, so I'm not seeing anybody in person. So now I'm in a habit of not being around people. So now I have to like shift my gears to work on like getting out of my damn house and being around people and doing the things that I've done before the pandemic. But it's a mental shift that has to occur. So it's not only the professionals and not only clients, it's everybody has to do that. Talk to people who haven't seen this video to remind people of what's at stake in terms of their mental health, their spiritual health, and encourage people to kind of stay on top of this because people are getting lax. The people who were talking about this and dealing with this from the jump all fared better. Even if they lost people, even if they got COVID, even if they had a rough time, they all fared better. It's the people who did not engage in some type of assistance, whether it's talking, whether it's spiritual through their church. If they didn't do anything, they suffered. So I'm always encouraging people, look, you don't have to, life doesn't have to be that way. I do realize culturally, America is a very self-focused, selfish, first world kind of country. And we're not used to like sacrificing. And so, I think I try to think about when was the last time the country as a whole sacrificed as a whole? We're not used to that now. We're used to everything being instant, emotionally, psychologically, physically, financially. I mean, I'm used to it too because I get on Amazon, I order something, it's here in 2 hours. So I'm, it's very convenient.
I really enjoyed this documentary, and I'm from Billings too. So when the pandemic came, my mom was going to work, and when she came home the next morning, she was like, "What's going on? There is nobody outside." So we happened to turn on the news and come to find out it was COVID-19. And I've been dealing with it pretty good because it got me closer to God. And like I said, this documentary was really, really inspiring, and I learned a lot out of it too.
Okay, I just want to say thank you so much. It was a combination of science and humanity that meshed very well together. Everybody seemed to be very comfortable and to understand exactly what was going on. And I wish that you could have done this for the government.
I'm overwhelmed by it. I just want to give you a 5-star review and just leave it at that. I
just want to say this to you, Emmett. This project that you was given, it came from God. It takes a special person to make other people feel comfortable to share that trauma that a lot of people haven't even addressed yet. You have to be in a comfortable space with a comfortable person to even open up. That's why when your film was going through, I was able to feel some stuff, like I said, I didn't even know I had even addressed, So I thank God for you. You've always been that open, friendly guy, that my yogi. When anybody can sit down and just talk. You feel the love when you sit down and talk with you, and it's very important. And I'm looking forward to more of your documentaries, like I said, from this.